here we are. This is a view, a sort of fanciful bird's eye view of the palace in 1843, done for Louis Philippe. This is a wonderful old book. It says, Louis XIV, who had not the predilections of his ancestors for this residence, said, at Versailles I am housed like a king, at Fontainebleau like a prince, at Compiègne like a peasant. So he clearly didn't think much of the accommodation for his hunting parties at Compiègne. But he didn't do anything about it. His great-grandson, Louis XV, decided to do something about it. And so he got Jacques Gabriel, well, originally Jacques Gabriel, the father, and then Jacques Gabriel, build this. An amazing sort of feat of architectural planning. There's this huge, long facade looking at the garden and across the garden at the forest of Compiègne, which is this great sort of royal hunting preserve. And then here, looking from the town, there's this enormous sort of, cour d'honneur, the court of honour, as an entrance to the palace. And the two kind of meet, and it's just brilliant the way he's got these two enormously large pieces of formal architecture to sit together on this weird angle, which is there because of the historic, form of the place. The cour d'honneur, you go in and it's basically the sort of basement story of the house. That you go upstairs, and then when you get upstairs, you find that the upstairs is actually the garden, ground floor, and so all of the staterooms on the garden just walk out. It's like a 40-minute train ride from Paris, and nobody goes. It's practically empty always. It's a fantastic place to go. Versailles, incredibly crowded. Fontainebleau, a few people. Compiègne, empty, literally nobody there. The palace was finished, I think completely finished, in 1788 and furnished and ready for use, which wasn't the absolutely ideal time for the House of Bourbon to complete a new palace, because obviously the next year, there was a revolution. And so, they didn't actually get to use it. And so then in 1795, the revolutionary government decided to sell the contents very sensibly, and so they sold everything. So then it was empty, and then Napoleon went, I think 1799, and then again 1804 or something, went and sort of looked and sort of thought, ooh, this would be nice, I'll do something here. Very beautiful sort of neoclassical staircase by Gabriel, and then there's that in that niche there is some mod con, some new technology, a bit of heating. So there's a stove, you see that black thing, and then standing on it, I'll do that so you can see it, sort of. There's a cast of that famous Apollo sculpture. And then in the foreground, at the foot of the stairs, there are these big sort of torchères to have, candelabra on top at night to light the place. But those are very Empire style. Here is the stove, which you can vaguely see, with Apollo on top. And that's just a sort of rather wonderful Empire solution to heating. And then here is the stair, and you can just see in those sort of garlanded wreath things in the arches are big ends with crowns on, and that's obviously, would have been an end for Napoleon. So it's originally, it's Gabriel, and then all that top bit has been redone under Napoleon, and then of course the ends removed the moment that he fell in 1814, 1815, and so Louis XVIII removing the N, and then Napoleon III putting it back. So this is the guard chamber, and this is a pretty magnificently scaled guard chamber, absolutely vast, done by Gabriel, I think, and let's see if we've got a detail here of the cornice in there, and the pilasters. And do you see the pilasters, the grooves and the pilasters have spears in them for the guards. And then there are Roman helmets, or what they thought of as Roman helmets at that point in sort of, 1780s France, holding up the modillions of the cornice. And then here's some very Napoleon III furniture, and this sort of what are these things called? These little conversation seats. They're called intime or something. So here's one for 2 people who want a cosy chat. And here instead 3 people who want a cosy chat, which is different, isn't it? But isn't that a beautiful object? It's so mad. It looks as if it's going to go spinning round. So this is basically, this is a Louis XVI room of 1775 or something, and then, furniture all done in 1850. And then here, all the door furniture replaced by Napoleon III, you see, with his imperial N in the middle there. And then here some more. And there the N is sort of embraced by an E for Eugénie, his famous Empress. Eugénie, who was actually, I didn't realize, was the sister of the Duchess of Alba or something. And so here is Napoleon's sort of state bedchamber. It's sort of rather tragic, really. So started in 1807, and by Josephine, his Empress. And so Josephine did not really get on with Percier Fontaine, who were, the official, imperial architects. And so she was allowed to work instead with this man called Berthaud. And so Berthaud really did this, and so he was the architect for Compiègne. Josephine and Berthaud working out this whole suite of staterooms, and her very much, and she had, I think, quite strong taste of her own. And so working on it from 1807 to 1809, and towards the end of 1809, it's nearly ready to move in. Unfortunately, that was the exact moment that Napoleon decided that really he did need to have a son. And, it would probably be quite helpful anyway to make some sort of a marriage that was a political alliance and would be advantageous and would sort. So anyway, so she's basically sacked, and so she never got to move into this place, which was almost finished then. And so she then goes back to Malmaison, which was her real home anyway, which she was allowed to keep. These rooms instead are used by Marie Louise, the daughter of the Emperor of Austria, who Napoleon marries in March 1810. So this is Napoleon's bedroom, and pretty magnificent it is too. Here is the fireplace. And there's his washstand. Got to wash your face in something. You might as well do it in that. Pretty marvellous. And presumably behind that screen there's his loo, I imagine. The details are incredible. Here's a curtain tie back. And look at that, I mean, each of those leaves is an individual piece that's been attached and wrapped in gold thread. I mean, they're so absolutely wonderful. And here there's a real close-up detail. You can see how obsessed I am with all this stuff. Look at that, and look at the way they've got the stitching of the gold thread going in different directions, giving it different sort of effects with the light. I mean, it's so brilliant. And here, next to there, his study, his library, which is one of the best rooms in the world. I think this is fantastic. And the entire room is fitted, do you see, around. I mean, that whole wall has no bookcases at all, but it's still got the bookcase structure continuing. And there's mahogany, and then gilt wood, carved, gilded wood, ornaments, all these palm leaf decoration going across it. And here's a detail of the carved gilt wood. And here the same sort of, actually I think that's probably gilt bronze there, around a stove. So no fireplaces, no open fires, just stoves. And how they work, I imagine they're fed from below, you see, and then you can regulate it up here. And he was very, very keen on these desks. He had Jacob Demel to make one of these for each of his studies. So he had one in each palace, an identical desk. And it closes auto. You see the sort of work surface slides out, and the flap comes down, and you work away, and the top of the desk slides back to open up, all in one gesture. And then you can quickly fold the front thing up and shove, and the whole thing snaps closed in a second. So to keep secret state papers safely hidden. So it's a rather brilliant piece of technology. And then he has more great technology, which is a jib door of a beauty not to be believed. With this jib door, you literally do not see if it's closed. And you literally cannot see the hinge. I mean, it's so beautifully done. Absolutely fantastic. I think that's one of the best rooms in the world. Now, going out of there, you can go straight into the Empress's apartment. So it's kind of these incredibly formal, incredibly grand rooms, but actually quite intimate because you can get from one to the other very, very quickly. It's rather a brilliant combination of tremendous formal courtly grandeur and intimate domestic arrangements. And so this is the Empress's breakfast room. Where are we going? Here is her bedroom. And this is just completely and utterly nuts, really, isn't it? But so this is the room planned by Josephine for herself, and then taken over and given to Mary Louise instead. And so Mary Louise arrives, and they had planned, the last wedding. Of course, it was a repeat of 1770, when Marie Antoinette had come to marry Louis XVI. And so Napoleon decided to make it even more elaborate this time. Basically, the same thing of meeting on the border and having a special little pavilion constructed on the border between Austria and France. She enters from Austria, dressed in Austrian clothes with Austrian attendants, and then is stripped completely naked, and her Austrian attendants take everything away. And then the French attendants instead come and dress her in French-made clothes and give her French everything. Napoleon decided that it did, because he was an emperor, not just a king, it had to be more elaborate, and so there was to be another ceremony, and so he had another building constructed where she was to arrive and kneel before him. And so he thought this was absolutely marvellous, perfect, And so this was arranged, and then they were to go to Compiègne, and there was to be a great banquet. And so presumably all the guests were invited for the banquet, and they were all... Anyway, so she's going, it's pouring with rain, and she's going in her French carriage with her French lady-in-waiting. Well, actually with Caroline Murat, who was Napoleon's sister. And she hasn't yet met Napoleon. She's meant to be going to this pavilion, special pavilion, to kneel before him. And so Napoleon gets too impatient, and so he goes with Murat or someone and stands in the rain under a church, sort of the porch of the steps of a church in a village on the road that they're going to be taking. And so sort of flags down the coach and opens the door, jumps in and kisses her. And this poor girl, who's 18 years old and he's 41. And I don't know if she'd actually seen him before. Probably not. But I mean, obviously she knew what he looked like, And I suppose she was quite intrigued. And probably her father told her it was a good idea and she had to do it for the sake of Austria. But imagine, you think you're going to have to go to a very formal ceremony and kneel before this, terrifying man who... And instead, suddenly he jumps into your coach and starts kissing you. And so then they arrive at Compiègne, and everybody's ready for the banquet. And Napoleon's like, oh no, fuck that, no banquet. Tell them all to go home. Or maybe they had the banquet themselves, I don't know. And they just go upstairs and they have dinner, the three of them, him, Mary Louise, and his sister Caroline, in, her private dining room. And then they go to bed, and he insists, he checks with his secretary that actually they are legally married because the marriage ceremony has already happened, with proxies. And so it is legal. So he's like, oh, okay, I think I'll, yeah. The poor girl, she must have been terrified. But apparently she wasn't. So, I've got his a Napoleon biography. And what does it say? Yes, he followed Mary Louise into her bedroom where he exercised his marital rights. In the morning, they took breakfast and lunch in her bedroom and were hardly parted for the next 48 hours. Both appeared ecstatically happy. Napoleon later reminisced that she kept asking for more. Oh, that's more lunch, I'm sure. In a letter to her father, she confessed that the Corsican ogre, in other words, the emperor he'd made her marry, was very engaging and very eager and almost impossible to resist.